Our brains are wired to find patterns. That's why my coffee machine in the morning, when it's preparing the frother, it blinks, and I can tell when it's about to end because the blink changes, and your brain is so wired to see that pattern that when it breaks, you're like, oh my God. It's just the way our brains are.
And I mean, just like that weird pattern of the idea that producer Chris only feeds us every other day.
Yeah.
And all, I mean, you just notice patterns in weird ways.
Yep. When I'm feeling generous.
Welcome to Tabletop Talk. Today, we are actually going to be answering a few viewer questions. I believe we got a list from a few people that we know, and there were a couple comments here and there, and we compiled a small list of some of the more interesting ones and decided that we would give it a shot. So I'm your host, Kyle, and with me is
Rick,
as well as producer
Chris. What's up, guys? I think that's the most excited I've ever heard you talking.
I was going to say that was actually more exciting than like when he got married. His idea was not even that excited.
This is the best day of my life.
Says the married man with 2 kids.
Precisely.
He knows they don't listen to this show. But our wives do, and we love you, honey. So, I think how we're going to go about this is we're going to have just producer Chris read off. He got the list compiled. And I think he was just going to read off a few, and we'll just go back and forth on them.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Yeah. You guys ready?
Yes. No. Yeah. Yes. No. Yes.
Big ones.
Wait. He's got one more in him.
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right,
no,
we're good. We're good. That was the real one. He does a weird nose twitch right before he finishes.
All right, question number 1. What was the moment you decided D&D was something you were absolutely going to try and play?
That's a great question.
That's a really good one.
I mean, we've talked about all of our playing history on the pod before, all the way back in like middle school. I'm almost
all
positive
the way elementary school for me, and I'm
almost positive I started playing because the kid that I spent time with after school started playing before me, and in order for me to still go over to his house, I had to join him at the club.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah, so it was more, I don't really remember, but I just remember the kid that
it was a friendship necessity.
Yeah, it was like, hey, I kind of have to, so let's just hang out, and then it was really fun. Fast forward to like now and starting to jump back in, it was absolutely this momentum that D&D has gotten, like watching like people like Joe Maglianello, like really big famous people, and like for Joe Maglianello specifically, people that your stereotypical, air quotes, but stereotypical, like what you would expect a D&D player to look like. Joe Maglianello, if you're not familiar with him, he is a very big, burly, buff, very not D&D on the surface looking player. And he's a huge hardcore D&D nerd, and it's awesome. Like he breaks a lot of the barrier for a player to they could look like anybody.
I think what's actually awesome is the fact you're able to pronounce his name multiple times.
Yes, yeah.
I've never once successfully done it, and all.
That's
so
the real
I'm
victory here.
Yeah,
that is the real victory here.
But it's guys like that. It's famous people who like we see as
like
cool.
Vin Diesel.
Yeah,
I love that.
Yeah.
I always decided if I ever had the rare opportunity to DM for Vin Diesel, I wouldn't give him dice, and I would just say he has to be able to perform the action, because I know the guy can. I know the guy can. Have you seen him? He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's Riddick.
Cool, like people that make it look cool. Not saying that like that's a hit against us normal folk.
We all know there's the occasional person that they don't mean to, but they just do not highlight the good qualities.
And as bad as it may sound, like when you say picture a D&D player, I think we all kind of have a similar rough, vague look.
I feel like
A-list celebrities probably aren't that.
It used to be that way. Now I'd say if you say list it, there's a lot of people who do it, and it's D&D has turned around. It's not like when we were kids. When we were kids, this was like that. Keep it like secret, keep it hidden, satanic panic and all. And
but that's also to my point is like it's evolved over the years and it's become less of this like weird thing. I also grew up in the church, so I was also told not to do it because it was demonic. Like all these weird pieces. And as I got older, it's like, no, it's actually really cool and 100% up my alley. And that window in for me was celebrities.
Well, and you've only been like, what, possessed twice since then?
Yeah, I think we haven't decided if the third time was really a legit one. I don't think we got the Vatican's approval.
I think that last one was just a little like demonic hiccup.
Yeah.
So
it didn't get the full Vatican endorsement, so I don't think it counts.
Yeah, so I think you're good there. For me, and it's funny because I grew up in a pretty religious family, but we were never like hardcore on the satanic panic. My mom like thought that was just silly and dumb. And I agree. I think there's obviously things you got to be careful about, but the things that people pick fights on are always the weirdest ones. For me though, it was probably my buddy, one of my best buddies who I'm still friends with to this day. He ended up playing it a couple times with his neighbor. And he invited me over to do so a few times. And that was kind of just, he mentioned it was cool. Me and him loved playing Lord of the Rings with like sticks and such and all that. So, and we played Warhammer. So I was pretty sold like at a very young age I don't know. I think first time I really played was middle school. First time I heard about the game and tried and wanted to play, but had no idea about was like elementary school, second grade, camping trip with a buddy of mine. He brought like the starter box and all, but I didn't understand it because we were still at a young enough age and my family is not the kind of people who played tabletop games.
Yeah.
I'm kind of the first like generation of Sherricks doing this sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But so for me, pretty early on, I think I was accidentally playing D&D without realizing I was playing D&D.
I think everybody who played on the playground pretending to be something else, particularly for our generation where we were at the formidable ages when like Lord of the Rings came out.
And there was only like a few games that were like the N64, so you weren't playing unless you had all your buddies with you.
Yeah, so
and your buddies and you were ready to go run around.
Yep, that was huge, and I think you are totally right that I think we all started playing before we realized that we were playing.
And I mean, it may not technically have been Dungeons and Dragons, but same concept. I mean, the game is literally all about imagination, and you're just coming up with a set of rules that you and your buddies agree on.
Yep,
doesn't matter anyone else's rules. So.
All right. On to the next one.
Yes.
All right.
Indubitably.
Indubs. All right. Where were you when you first saw the game or learned about the game?
Oh, I mentioned already. I was like at a camp cabin thing with my buddy. He was kind of my version of your friend you were talking about. Like that one friend that was just the cool kid and you wanted to hang out with all the time. And you were good friends with them, but everybody wanted their attention.
Yep.
No, so it was like I said, I think about second grade, went camping with him and his family. He brought the box for it, and that was probably the first real time I had heard about Dungeons and Dragons, but before really knowing even what it was.
Yeah. I remember, so like growing up 90s, early 2000s, do remember the satanic panic of Dungeons and Dragons and being told not to play it, that I would be conjuring demons if I played. Similar to what you hear now with some of these like places saying that like why Harry Potter shouldn't be in schools and stuff like that. It's like,
man, they brought Harry Potter back again.
It's just all of that, but back in like the mid 90s of when I was like, oh, that sounds cool. And they're like, no, never play that. And you're like, okay, I won't, I guess.
I had a neighbor who, I think I mentioned this in an earlier episode, burnt a mini of mine that was apparently that, even though they collected Warhammer.
Yeah.
Fun fact for all you nerds out there, Warhammer and D&D were kind of created together.
Yeah.
They're meant to slightly be in the same universe. You know?
Reference back to a previous episode where we had our own Dr. RPG run through some of that history of those games together and how
That
they
was
were
a
kind of
long
combined.
episode,
That
mostly
was.
because of Dr. RPG and me. When Jeremy gave us those questions, I think we misunderstood the project.
Yeah. But back to that. That's why I think it's the end of season 3, maybe season 4 of Stranger Things, where they blame like the destruction of the town and like the mall exploding or something from Stranger Things, and they show the news outlets saying that they're blaming, all the families are blaming it on D&D and satanic cults and all this because it was D&D and that's what you did at the time. That was in the 80s, but in the 90s it was still there, and I remember watching and be like, oh my gosh, that's 100% how that happened. Where anything bad, if they found out that the kids played,
Yeah.
it was a demon thing.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, and it didn't help that there was like I don't remember his name. And if you guys want, you can look this up. I'm not saying to do it, but there was a serial killer who I can't remember his name, but they linked him to the fact that he did D&D and he himself actually was like quote unquote Satanist. And but I think most of it ended up kind of being just weird hearsay rumors. Like,
yeah.
He just happened to actually play D&D, and that
I guarantee
added to it.
I guarantee you one of the podcasts that do serial killers have talked about him.
I'm sure.
Guarantee it.
I'm sure. We should do a team up, you guys.
Yeah.
But what do you think he played as?
A barbarian.
He was clearly a cleric. Cleric pushed too far.
Yep.
Alrighty, guys. Question number 3. Did you sit in on a campaign or did you dive into one going in completely blind?
That's also
To learn it.
That's a really good question.
Mm-hmm.
So my middle school campaign, there were more kids in the club that could play at any one time. So we all rotated roles. And I showed up a couple weeks into the club. So I was at the bottom of the list. So by virtue of the pecking order, I got to watch for a couple weeks, which helped. I feel like if you are totally fresh or totally new, I feel like going in completely blind was a pre-YouTube era kind of thing.
I was going to say, yeah. I went in.
So many resources that you could watch that aren't even a full campaign to watch, but just like how to play this, how to do a character sheet, how to
make the most broken, like...
Yeah. There are way too many resources out. Unless you're intentionally going in wanting to be blind for how it plays and just go in with nothing at all, you have to intentionally do that. Otherwise, there's way too many resources out there to help you gain a little bit of ground before you start playing.
I went in completely blind. I was in middle school. Like I said, my buddy was playing it and his neighbor would run it. And it was like he's not their actual uncle, but like uncle by like neighbor association, like family friend. He was the one running it, and his kid was like a couple years younger than us. So I went in completely blind during 3.5 with no explanation. This guy did not teach me how to play even, and he just expected me to know how to make a character. Like he just handed me the book, but I didn't have my own copy, and I had like 2 minutes to make something that at that time took like 2 days to make a character. And at least it felt like it. Yeah, so I went in completely blind, no idea what I was doing. And yeah, but I ended up loving it. It was fun. I will say it was hard. It was really hard trying to figure out how to play. So definitely not an issue you run into anymore. I think now you probably have, whether you realized it or not, seen D&D in some way or another.
Yeah, especially nowadays.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole movie on it and all. And while it may not be the game,
good movie, there's a whole lot of other movies that were made, but there is one good
they're
movie.
good for other reasons. And all.
I've always been a believer in, because this is totally me, but I learn from experience, not from just being told. You know, I got to see it, got to get my hands dirty, sort of thing. Anyway, question number 4. What are 2 positives that your first DM influenced on you? and 2 negatives.
I will say this goes to that same gentleman who was my DM at the time.
Mhm.
It's a little hard to find a couple positives, but mostly because I didn't get it and he was not a very patient teacher.
Awesome.
But I would say there were a couple things. So I'm going to first start with the negatives. That way I come out on a more high yay note and all, and Rick doesn't feel sad when he goes to answer his. So the first negative one was I did not understand how combat worked. I did not understand the stuff because we were running it through our head. We were doing theater of the mind. So there wasn't even like a tabletop setup for me to visualize exactly what was going on. And we were fighting some wolves, and it was like my first combat ever in this thing. And we were all surrounding one wolf. It was like maybe a hit or like 1 or 2 hits away from death. I was a rogue at the time, so I knew I didn't have enough like damage output to take the creature down. So I said I was going to go and start to attack the next wolf because I knew that like our fighter at the time who was going to go after me was just going to finish this thing in one hit. So why waste my attack on it?
Yeah.
And he flipped out on me about leaving combat. You never leave combat. That leads to attack of opportunity. And it was all this stuff that was like, you could have just said, are you sure you want to do that? Because if you go to step out, the wolf will get you.
Yeah.
Something that's a pretty easy. That was not what happened. He exploded on me about this.
Awesome.
I don't know why I went back. Probably because I had no one else to play D&D with at the time. It was the only sort of thing, and I was just so addicted to it.
Mhm.
If that hasn't been clear by my unnecessary amount of knowledge, it's a problem. Someone get me some help. The other worst thing that happened there was I was not making a threatening gesture, or I wasn't trying to in game. Not
You sure?
at the time I was small and scrawny. Like I may not be tall.
Okay, checks
but
out then.
at that time I was like,
Yep.
and I could give Gumby a run for his money on scrawniness.
I'd pay to see that.
No, we ran into like a satyr and I think some dryads, and we didn't know what to expect from them, and so I made a point that I put my hand on my hilt, not in like a drawing fashion, but just kind of like that steady, uneasy, like, you know, just you're coming up to somebody and you're like, hey, I don't know if I should trust you or not. So you're grabbing the thing, not in a threatening thing, but like, I'm ready to defend myself.
Yeah.
And all. And instead he made it apparently sound like I like was like holding the sword with like the drawing arm ready.
Almost too over dramatized.
Yeah. And so that like led to apparently a whole thing that and actually it wasn't him. It was his son. But he let this happen.
Yep.
Was his son decided that was super aggressive of me and attacked me in the middle of this. And he just kind of would let that happen. And so because that happened a lot for a long time, I assumed in-party fighting was a regular part of the game.
Yeah.
The good parts, I would say, is that he did give us a lot of freedom and allowed us to do things. He made it very clear there was a sword that was cursed there. Nobody was allowed to play an evil character. So I played neutral or chaotic neutral, which was like everyone's excuse to play evil in a non-evil campaign back in the day. And I guarantee none of us were chaotic neutral. We were all pretty on the evil spectrum. But this sword like was clearly like whispering to us. We could give you power, strength, glory, and
as all normal swords do.
Yeah, and so of course everyone else was like, "All right, that thing's evil. Let's ignore it." And I decided it would just be fun. I was like, "Huh." Power and glory, you say? Sure. And I grabbed it, and before I'm even able to do anything, again, his son attacked me. But the fact, it was clear. He was excited. He was like, cool, someone went for it. Like, this will be fun. The other good thing I learned is you got like, and I think this is thinking about it, it might be a bad thing actually. I think and Jorge, who wrote Epic the Musical, will get this reference, anyone who's been listening to that, but I kind of learned that ruthlessness is mercy upon yourself in certain games, and so now I've learned for myself not to be as hardcore of a DM.
Yeah.
Because that does not make for a fun game for new players who do not know what's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, that was a little bit of a long answer, but
no, you're good. I would say, I think the thing that my first DM, he was one of the science teachers at our middle school. The two things I think he did really well was allow for a bunch of 12-year-olds to flourish and let our creativity naturally go. He let just us do kind of realistically whatever we wanted in game. Like, he didn't necessarily pigeonhole anyone. Like, there were a lot of really weird, random actions that didn't make sense because we thought it was the funniest thing ever. And
like the pissing into the wind, and
100%. And he would find in-game ways to course correct that didn't feel like we were having our hands held.
Yeah.
And he managed a large group of us with only 5 spots to play. I think there was probably like 15 of us there, so there was always a big line of people waiting to play. He managed us waiting really well. Like, we never felt left out by watching. And he managed the flow of how it worked for taking turns realistically really, really well. There's one I remember specifically where the kid couldn't go. So more or less, if you died or you didn't get to go to the club that day or that week, your character would die. You'd go to the end and you'd have to wait. And one of them, we were in a dungeon and he goes, yeah, so after last week, after your long rest, one of your characters didn't sleep well, so he was really tired, and he leaned against the wall and he pushed a pressure sensitive tile, and a spike came out and like went through his head. And we were like, oh my God. But that was his way of cycling out the player to bring somebody else in. Like, he always made it really exciting, and it was always super fun for us to see. We couldn't wait to see how someone would die.
I will say, I feel like, especially with older versions, there was a little more spontaneousness from the DMs of that time period. Just pure, like, you know what? Here's a railroaded death for you. Have fun. Which works great in a big group thing.
Yeah. I think as I look back on it, I don't recall ever seeing a source book or a character sheet or anything like, so maybe this is even it's a negative from the player side, but a positive for how he could run a game. But we were just told our characters. I don't remember ever seeing anything other than like him handing us a dice to roll. Like, I didn't get to see any of the like minutiae of how to play. It was just you were there and you played, and then you would take your turn. So I think even then I probably would have liked to see stuff. Once that club transitioned more into Warhammer, we got a lot more. The books that we could check out from him and like start seeing and building armies and stuff. So it was very interesting that he didn't have them for the campaign play, but then he had them for Warhammer. So
and
not having
that could
materials.
Be also just because that time period of D&D was very complex,
and it could have been. He might have seen that having us try it on our own would have been a disaster. So
he probably didn't want to spend like 30 minutes explaining to each student every action before they took theirs, because you and me know exactly how we were in middle school. Everyone listening should know that there's no way it's not Rick goes to take his turn, needs an explanation of what to do, and instead of me listening when it gets to my turn, I'm like, I'm sorry, now what do I do? No.
Yeah. And I would say the only other like negative was not even on him, but just the way of play. The first time I got into the game, I was gone the next week. So I literally got to play once.
Ooh.
And then died and had to go back to the back of the line to watch. So I watched a ton, played a little, watched a ton. So but that's also part of the positive is he had too many kids to play. So maybe the negative would be he could have seen, hey, these kids are really going to like this. I have more than I can. What if I get another advisor, another teacher to come in to run a second one? But
yeah, that would have been cool.
The D&D club that we've started at the high school here, we have enough for like 3 campaigns. So we have 4 advisors and 3 of us are DMing. So I get to DM for the first time ever.
Really?
And it was
Oh,
very
man.
spontaneous. And the groups had started doing their session zeros and they were like, hey, this group's not here. And it was one of the students that wanted to DM at first. I was like, great, I'll just kind of watch. And then they're like, oh, he wants to play. And I was like, I'll DM. I was like, oh, wait, I have nothing planned. So the group wasn't there. So I got some time to like pre-plan. And then some kids showed up. And I was like, okay, I am about 15 minutes ahead of you. So we aren't going to be doing a session 0 because I'm still figuring out what we're going to play. But I'm excited. And I've got a little bit of the world done. I know what the quest we're going on. And right now, all I'm deciding is, do I let them make their characters or do I just go full in on this and they are playing blind and they just find out things about their character as it happens? Because I've seen some videos of DMs doing that and it's like, let's just go for it. So I think I told them, I was like, make a character sheet just in case, but there is a chance that I'll hand you a blank character sheet with just a name.
Nice.
And then we'll just play that way.
Is this the one that Anthony, who was on our thing, is part of too?
Yep.
So Anthony, if you're listening, if you guys need another DM, you can always hit me up.
Yeah.
You know I've got the time. I know you can feel me looking straight towards your house, Anthony. I know where it's at.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah. off track of that. But yeah. It was a great experience. It's hard, like I said, kind of hard to find like straight up negative aspects of it, other than just I didn't get to play as much because of how many kids there were.
All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. So good thing that was all the questions, right, Producer Chris, or were there more? I mean, I don't think there were more. What are you doing? There's there more?
There's so much.
Oh my gosh, we're doing a part 2. Probably. We're doing a part 2.
Part 2s.
While Rick and I get worried about that, Producer Chris, why don't you tell them where they can find us?
Absolutely. Also, on Spotify, they now have comments available. So if you're watching, listening there, go ahead and hit up the comments section to chat with us.
That's because I think Spotify heard me saying comments so many times. They're like, for Kyle.
Yeah.
For Kyle, we'll have
the
comments.
first one to come to mind when I saw it. I'm like, finally.
I can't screw it up anymore. I still will.
Also, make sure you follow, rate, and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening to us on. Also, follow us on X at TTTalk Pod for updates and podcast episodes and YouTube releases. On TikTok at TabletopTV LLC. We're posting over there as well. Join our Reddit page at r/TabletopTV. And finally, make sure you go like our videos and subscribe to our channel, our YouTube channel, called Tabletop TV, where we're posting tabletop gameplay and rules, how to plays, campaigns, all over there. All these links are in the description down below of each of these episodes, and also at our Linktree, linktr.ee/tabletoptalk. Back to you guys.
Awesome. Well, you know what, Rick? I think that was pretty good. What did you think?
I thought that was pretty okay. For your Curb Your Enthusiasm fans out there, it was pretty good.
So, as for that, adventurers, we love you guys. You have a good rest of the morning, evening, afternoon, whichever time you are listening to this. And take care. Tabletop Talk, out.
Deuces.
Bye.
Guys, I was meant to have the last word. What the hell?
No.
And there's our ending.
I still don't get the last word.
Nope.